Hi all, I have something to offer you today, and I'm structuring it around the biggest mistake I ever made going raw vegan. However, this could really be applied to almost anything, but I'm gonna call it that. This is the biggest mistake I made when I went raw vegan. So I'm gonna set it up a little bit and then go into the details of it, and then we'll come back to food in particular. So the biggest mistake that I made was to try to translate what I already knew into this new thing. So when you try to translate a language, for instance, I watched a friend of mine and her daughter try to kind of work through an assignment that she had in Spanish, and they speak English. And what they were doing was basically translating word for word the English word into the Spanish word. And if you've ever tried to learn another language, you ultimately know it doesn't really work like that, because the other language generally will have a whole different underlying structure. So just translating point for point or word for word doesn't really work. Another example might be you go as a visitor into another culture, say an indigenous culture in Malaysia, for example. I've just been reading a little bit about that. And if you go in there with your whole structure and unaware even that you have this structure, which is another point to this, and you come in and, for instance, you're going to try to show these people what to do or tell them what to do in agriculture or something, for example. But you don't understand that in their culture, if you directly try to direct someone or directly try to tell them to do something different, that's actually very insulting, and that they have very different ways of doing it. So in both of these examples, if you don't actually just spend time being with what you're translating to, or being with that culture where you're coming into and maybe trying to go from point A to point B somehow, if you don't spend time actually being with that culture, that language, you're going to be getting it wrong, and you're going to really be missing the point. So really we need to get under the ideas that we have and the structure that we have to really be with what's there and be able to integrate from there. So now we'll go back to food. So this is the biggest mistake I made when I went raw vegan. I tried to translate how we eat on now I was eating healthy, so I'll call it a healthy American diet as opposed to standard American diet. But I tried to translate how I ate in that context into eating raw vegan. So that looked like, I knew we ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Sometimes we had dessert. We sort of ate at these intervals. And I did play with that here and there with like eating 6 meals a day or eating 2 meals a day or that kind of thing. But generally what I was doing was trying to impose a structure on my body. And the point that I was completely missing was that I wasn't spending time with my body. I was just, from my mind, imposing ideas, concepts, and structure onto a fully functioning, self-regulating system. Do you understand what I mean? This system exists, and I come in and try to change my diet, right, to be healthier. And what I missed was really being with my body to show me how to eat. We have this, I think, false divide between me and my body. I mean, I'm even using those terms. Our language here is difficult, so we kind of have to dig under that. But we think of me, and then we think of my body as two separate entities, and you can you can think of them also as like the intellect and the body, right? So really, if we talk about it in those terms, the intellect is a great servant of the body, which is the self-regulating system, but the intellect will take us all over the place and disconnect us from the knowing of the body, from the self-regulation of the body. So what we need to do is put those back in order and really be with the body. And the truth of it is there aren't two anyway, right? But if we cut ourselves off at the neck and forget that we have a body and are just, you know, this part of us, the intellect, then we're really lost if we think that's all we are. And in our culture, we are really trained that way. We're programmed that way. So the me that we think of, the intellect, is a bunch of programs, is a bunch of concepts and ideas. And that's what the me is that we think of. The body is not that. The body is the real. The body does not speak in ideas and concepts and words and structures and programs and conditioning. The body doesn't work that way at all. The body is in the now, in the present. So that's why, you know, your body is you can always go back to the sensations of your body to come back into the present moment. It's 100% always here. If it wasn't, your breathing wouldn't be regulated, your temperature wouldn't be regulated, all of the minuscule millions of things happening in your body wouldn't be regulated because they can't run on ideas and concepts. They have to be now and always assessing now, right? Always being in the now. But we tend to not be that at all and be in the future, and be thinking about concepts and ideas and running our programming and our conditioning. And none of that is our fault. We have been programmed and conditioned by people who were programmed and conditioned. But what we want to look at really is getting back into awareness of the body, and that the body is the real and the body is the now. The body's really what's happening, and the intellect can be a tool that the body can use to procure food, to make food, all of that, to solve all of the issues of how we get the body to the store, how we start the car, what route do we take, what grocery store do we go to, how do we pay for it, how do we bring it home. All those can be solved with the intellect. It's a great tool, but the body is the one that is really real, right? So what do we need to do? Do we need to reprogram it? No, we don't do any reprogramming, because reprogramming is the intellect. Reprogramming is the me, the identity, or the character, who we think we are. We don't need to reprogram. We just need to recognize that that's what the me is, and go back to really living from the body, from the knowing of the body. So we want to throw out those programs. The ideas and the concepts and the programs can be useful if we're aware of them, and they can be useful in excuse me, understanding sort of maybe a bigger picture. But they're not useful for the body, because the body doesn't speak that language. And if we're not speaking the body's language, if we're not really having our attention focused on what is the body telling me, learning the culture of the body, if we're trying to do that word-to-word translation, or coming into the culture of the body and just trying to impose something from the mind on it, such as, this is how I'm going to eat now, this is the book I'm going to follow and the instructions I'm going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, completely not recognizing that your body knows exactly what it needs, and your body communicates what it needs through all of the pathways, right? Through all of the awarenesses that we have if we're tuned into our bodies. We have to be tuned into our bodies. So I will send you to my 54 Senses little course that I did. If you're interested in that, I'll link that below, because that's how we get back in touch with our bodies. In our current culture, we're so out of control, out of touch with our bodies. that we don't even feel them. We sort of try to suppress everything or address symptoms, and we don't recognize that the body is communication itself and is always in the now and always knowing what to do. So I think that that's it. So what I would say, that's my biggest mistake, is not just simply being with my body, having my attention focused on my body, relearning my body, relearning what it feels like through all of the 54 plus senses, rediscovering what it feels like to be alive, and following those instructions. Now, I did do that. And my first book is called Guided by Your Own Stars, and is about that reconnection. The second book, even more about that reconnection. But that took me many, many years really to get to a point where I wasn't trying to impose structure from the mind, where I wasn't trying to learn facts about nutrition, and all that can be really helpful. Ooh, baby in the background. Not mine. All that can be really helpful and useful information when we're making our choices, maybe at the grocery store, whether we choose organic or not, that kind of thing. But really what we want to be super, super duper tuned into is what our body's telling us. So if I could do anything different, I would jump ahead on that timeline. And of course, there's no way I could have, because I didn't have any language for that. I didn't have any understanding of that. None of it. So the way I eat now is not really transferable from the language of the standard American diet, for example. I don't really eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't really eat breakfast foods or dinner foods at the appropriate time of day, that kind of thing. I eat when I'm hungry, and I eat what my body wants me to eat. Now, that being said, of course, if you're coming off of a different kind of diet where you may be addicted to sugar, to salt, to fats, whatever, you have these habitual things that you do, you know, eating Doritos or whatever, you have to, of course, allow your body a period of time to detox out of that. My body does not ask for any of those things. It doesn't want any of those things ever. So yeah, if I could do anything different, I'd move ahead that timeline and go, oh, okay, back to what my body's telling me. You don't need a book or another person, any kind of expert, including myself, to tell you what and when to eat. You might find it useful to look at those things to point you back to yourself and to perhaps show you a different way of being or different way of creating food. That can be very, very useful. But as far as when to eat and what to eat for you specifically, you have to just be in tune with your body, or else you're imposing the structure. And there are lots of issues that can come along with that, because you won't be in touch with what your body's telling you it needs in the moment. So that's it for today, and I hope you have a wonderful one. Thanks for being here.